There are fears the United States is on the verge of running out of money. The American government's now reached the maximum amount of debt it's allowed to owe by law. The Democratic President Barack Obama is trying to convince the Republican-dominated Congress to raise the debt ceiling, already at a staggering $14.3 trillion. Excuse me. If the president fails, it's possible America could default on its loans, with potentially disastrous consequences for the global economy. Here's Michael Brissenden.
They say golf can be a true test of character, a game of skill and temperament in equal measure, a bit like politics. Often, it's also a time for reflection. But even this unusual pairing on the course last week of the President and the Republican House Speaker John Boehner failed to make any ground in what has become the latest intractable political battle in Washington.
We will not agree to the President's request to increase the debt limit without serious spending cuts and reforms to the way we spend the American people's money. No more kicking the can down the road.
I have no intention of voting to raise the debt ceiling.
This Sunday, the showdown in Washington over taxes and spending.
Deadlocked. Talks to reduce the government's debt collapse as Republicans walk away. And the
debt has long been a talking point in this town. But now ideological differences and bitter brinkmanship are pushing the US towards a dangerous precipice. The country has run out of money. The debt ceiling set by Congress that determines how much the nation can borrow has hit its limit, $14.3 trillion. If it's not raised by August the 2nd, the fallout will be serious and felt well beyond the US Capitol.
The fears are, and I think they're warranted, that potentially the US wouldn't be able to fund itself. That could have implications from the rating agencies. Some of the rating agencies have already warned that the US is at risk of potential downgrade. As we know, credibility once lost is very difficult to regain.
The President needs congressional approval to raise the debt ceiling, a procedural matter that in previous administrations has been debated but always in the end passed. Now, though, the debate has become part of the wider ideological approach to spending, debt and above all tax.
It's a game of brinkmanship, it's a game of hardball. No one is, you weaken your position to come out and say, hey, let's calmly be reasonable about this and maybe there could be some give and take here.
As a deputy congressional editor for Politico magazine, Laura McGann has been consumed by this story as much as anyone.
Democrats are saying we should cut spending and we should raise taxes, and Republicans are saying we cannot raise any taxes at all for anybody.
Weeks of talks between congressional leaders and the Vice President have gone nowhere. But with time running out, the President himself has now been forced to take his pitch off the golf course and into the smokeless rooms of the White House.
Republicans want to pull Obama into this fight. They want to say, spend it, they want an opportunity to hit the president on anything that happens, especially with 2012 right around the corner and our next presidential race coming up.
Republicans campaigned strongly and successfully on the debt in last year's midterm congressional elections. Last week, the Congressional Budget Office released its long-term budget outlook and predicted that the US debt will reach 100% of GDP sometime later this year. And if anything, the Republican position has become even more resolute.
We have a spending problem. We don't have a problem because we tax too little. The way we get the economy growing again is in the private sector. Raising taxes is not going to help get that done.
But in what is now an almost permanent campaign, the President is hoping Americans will look beyond the mind-boggling figures and statistics. Even now, he says, governments have to spend.
We could decide in solving our fiscal problems that we can't afford to make any of these investments, and those of us who've done very well don't have to pay any more taxes in order to fund these investments. But I want to make clear that's not our history. That's not who we are.
With an eye to next year's presidential election, compromise is not something either party is comfortable with. And there's a real danger that both sides will see some political advantage in holding their ground. But the fact that US politicians are even discussing the prospect of default has already spooked skittish global markets.
So in some sense, there are so many things out there right now that are causing that anxiety, not just the debt ceiling, but the situation in Greece and other countries in Europe, various wars, etc. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there. People are very risk averse.
If there's one thing Americans are growing used to, it's uncertainty. The unemployment rate is still hovering around 9%, consumer spending is still weak, the economic recovery has stalled. The argument in Washington is about how best to stimulate growth, but some of those watching the political fight fear that unless a compromise can be reached in the short term, any prospect of long-term recovery may be simply academic.
If you were to give these people who are looking at all of these problems some advice, what would you say?
Raise the debt ceiling limit.
Do it
as soon as possible. I think. I mean, it's become a catalyst or it's become a beacon, so to speak, for trying to work out a lot of other challenges. I'm very sympathetic to the importance of working out those other challenges, but this isn't the thing to hold hostage.